More rumors continue to surface a week before the draft. Trey Lance to Houston rumors. Cody and I will tell you why that is a bad decision and how this roster should be viewed for the 2023 season.
And to tie it all in, we want to develop a great team here that we can deliver wins to the city of Houston. We want to deliver a championship here to the city of Houston, and that's what it'll be about.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Thursday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Johnson Sports Guy Hickman, and of course, I'm joined by none other than Sports Illustrated's own and Texan and Houston Rocket beat reporter Cody Davis. Make sure you are subscribed to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube. Subscribe, comment, like, and share, of course. And also subscribe to the Locked On Texans podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Megaphone, and Spotify. You can find us on all of the major podcasting platforms. For today's podcast, we got to talk about which free agent could be the most beneficial to the 2023 Houston Texans success, and also look at how this roster, which is currently constructed a week before the draft, is viewed. And can D'Amico win with this roster? But first, of course, Cody, there's no way we can start today's show without talking about the rumors that is surrounding the Houston Texans for another day. This time, the rumors are surrounding quarterback still, but it's not.
Of course. What else is it going to surround?
It's not a quarterback coming out of the NFL draft. It's actually a quarterback that D'Amico Ryans, Bobby Slowick, some guys that were brought over from the San Francisco 49ers team has some familiarity with, in a relationship with, some would say, and that's former number 3 overall pick Trey Lance. According to Ian Rappaport, the 49ers have received inquiries from several teams looking for a potential trade for Trey Lance. The conversations have been a result of San Francisco fielding the calls, not making them, with teams aware that Brock Purdy is the likely future starter. And of course, this now warps in the Houston Texans. And the conversations, man, and you know what? I got to say this, Cody. We got to give a lot of credit to those in the Texan Twitter world because they do a very fun job of keeping this team active in terms of talking points. But Trey Lance to Houston, does it make sense? Yes or no? I want to say this. Trey Lance to Houston. Trey Lance is a quarterback that has only played, I think, in 9 games, started 8, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
This year, he's due nearly $10 million going into his 3rd year in the NFL. Again, only played 9, 8 games. Hasn't had that much success due to injuries and being a younger quarterback. The San Francisco 49ers, a couple of seasons ago, in a draft class that included Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, we all know the names, Justin Fields, they traded 3 first-round picks, and I want to say a 3rd, to go and get Trey Lance. 2 seasons later, Brock Purdy, who is currently injured, and we don't even know if Brock Purdy is going to be ready for the start of the season, let alone training camp. They're getting calls about Trey Lance. And I believe that the 49ers are flirting with the idea of moving on from Trey Lance. What does that say about Trey Lance? Why would the Houston Texans, who have an opportunity to draft their own quarterback with the number 2 overall pick, and for some reason, the same people I'm seeing, well, this quarterback class isn't that great, are some of the same people I'm seeing advocating for Trey Lance and also advocating for Will Levis over the likes of C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson. Listen, guys, there is a tale there that San Francisco is willing to at least listen to calls, right? This is the NFL. You got to listen to calls But I do believe that there is a thought in that building that says, you know what, maybe we need to go with the guy that got us to the NFC Championship game last year. And if he didn't get hurt, maybe there's a different outcome against the Eagles. I think the Eagles still may win the game. Who knows? But bringing in Trey Lance, who Davis Mills on a roster already, who's also in that draft class, I believe. Yep, in that same draft class.
Most definitely. He's in that draft class.
In that same draft class. Has more NFL experience. And I don't want to sink in nearly $10 million for a quarterback with 8 starts, 9 games, hasn't been super productive in those games, in those starts, when I could logically draft a quarterback at 2, right? And with the number 2 overall pick, logically, I can invest in either my offense or my defense with 12 and then do the same thing at 33. Guys, I hear it. The Texans will not give up a first-round pick. I will stand on what I'm about to say, Cody, and that is I believe the number 33 overall pick is more valuable to the Houston Texans than trading that pick for Trey Lance, who, yes, he has NFL experience, but how much? And if I am a front office guy, I'm looking at this situation and I'm saying, guys, we just brought in Shane Day, Bill Lazor, Bobby Slowick. We brought in some guys that have been able to be successful in the NFL, putting together an offense, which leads me to believe we should be able to draft a quarterback with the number 2 overall pick and replicate some success early on for a young guy that maybe Trey Lance hasn't even been able to see due to him not being on the field. This is a bad decision. It is a bad thought. And with the number 33 overall pick, that is more valuable than a quarterback going into his 3rd year, has only played in 8 games and hasn't been that good as well. His best game came against one of the worst defenses in the league in 2022, 21, I believe. And you know what that team was? The Houston Texans. Cut it out. Trey Lance to Houston is a terrible rumor, and that would be, I think, more detrimental to Houston's future than drafting Will Levis. If you want a quarterback like Trey Lance, by all means. Anthony Richardson is right there. He has the athletic ability. He has some of the same throwing flaws, but he has a higher ceiling. You go get AR-15. You do not trade for Trey Lance. My goodness, guys. That is a terrible decision. Cody, please take it away.
And I'm glad that you mentioned the 33rd pick because I was able to speak to someone and they told me that the San Francisco 49ers are actually seeking a 2nd-round pick back in return.
If a team is seeking a 2nd-round pick,
the services of Trey
2
Lance.
years later,
for the services of Trey Lance, John, I'm not about to get too worked up about this rumor because, like I keep mentioning, first and foremost, this is, and I know on yesterday.
I hope they can come watch this on YouTube so they can see our faces. This is ridiculous.
Like on yesterday, I mentioned 8 potential quarterbacks that the Houston Texans have been linked to since January 9th, which was the day after the end of the 2022 campaign. With this rumor of Trey Lance, that has been bumped up to 11 because we now have to add in Will Levis. There was also the small rumor out there about Mac Jones being on the trading block, and it was like whether or not the Houston Texans are going to get involved. 11 quarterbacks for the Houston Texans, 11 options for the Houston Texans heading into the 2023 campaign. John, once again, this is poker face. I'm to the point now, every single rumor, especially around that position, is Lady Gaga's poker face. I wish I could play the song, but then we're going to get copyrighted. Then it's probably going to get taken down on YouTube. So Lady Gaga, if you see this, please give us permission to use at least 30 seconds of the song, because that is what I truly believe. I do believe next Thursday, with the 2nd overall pick, the Houston Texans will select CJ Stroud, because at the end of the day, John, when you break down all 11 of these quarterbacks, Bryce Young, CJ, AR-15, Hooker, Jackson, Jimmy G, Carr, Davis Mills, if you want to run it back with him, Will Levis, Mac Jones, and now Trey Lance. Outside of Bryce Young getting drafted number 1 overall by the Carolina Panthers, to me, CJ Stroud is the next best option for the Houston Texans to go with their quarterback situation. That is just me, John. I'm not about to dive into this. I can see that Trey Lance has the potential. However, the one thing that bugs me the most about Trey Lance is the fact that he doesn't really have NFL experience. He really doesn't have football experience. This is a guy, when you go back in college, he only played 19 games in a 3-year span, and that was a mixture of due to him, I think, redshirting his first year at North Dakota State, if I'm not mistaken. Then, of course, there was the COVID year. And I know some of you guys might hear that and think to yourself, well, why is that important? Why are you bringing up his college stats? Well, the reason why I'm talking about the lack of games that he played in college, even more so the lack of games that he played in the NFL, we have already seen what that can do to a quarterback's development. Just take a look at Davis Mills. He was in that same boat of a guy who did not play that much in college due to injuries. Of course, the 2020 season was due to the pandemic. We have seen the effect how that has hampered his development. So if you already went down that route with Davis Mills, why in the world would you want to go down that route again? I do believe, like I mentioned, that Trey Lance has the potential, but a change of scenario and the best possible coaching staff is going to have to get the best version of Trey Lance out of him. And I don't think the coaching staff that the Houston Texans have as of right now will be beneficial to him. John, once again, poker face with the number 2 overall pick, CJ Stroud. I'm calling it right now.
I would disagree and say this coaching staff would be great for Trey Lance.
Really?
But
I only say that only because when you take a look at the head coach in DeMeco Ryans, he's not Kyle Shanahan. You know,
well, and
that's what I meant to the coaching staff.
That brings me back to, if Kyle Shanahan is ready to move on from him, I think that's a tell. But I think this coaching staff would do good with Trey Lance. But I also think this coaching staff would do good for Davis Mills. And I don't see what Trey Lance does that makes him better than Davis Mills as an option. And I am on record by saying there should be no more Davis Mills as a starting quarterback for Houston. And I will go.
That's all I could see.
Okay, well, how much that's going to win you some games, man? Like, I just see it. It just doesn't make sense, guys. Trey Lance needs to stay either where he is. Should not be coming to Houston. For those of you who are flirting around with the number 12th overall pick, you guys understand how ridiculous that sounds. Like 33 sounds bad. 12 sounds ridiculous. They need to figure out how to clean their own mess in San Fran. Houston should not get involved. And for the love of God, this team for 20 years worked their asses off to be second to the New England Patriots. The Patriots were their big brothers. Can we not here in Houston try to replicate the success of a team that hasn't necessarily they haven't won a championship? This shouldn't be the AFC South Texan 49ers. This shouldn't be the Houston 49ers. Allow this team to build their own identity by being the Houston Texans. Trey Lance to Houston, I would rather have Davis Mills as the starting quarterback, and I will go on record by saying that. A delicious snack, but don't want all of the sugar and calories, then you got to try the best tasting protein bar ever. Built, you got to try one of these. The best thing about Built Bar is they are covered in 100% real chocolate. They come in amazing flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. Only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. Right now, you can head into your nearest Walmart to pick up a 4-box in the pharmacy section, or if you're close to a Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box right now with our hit flavors, brownie batter puff and the churro puff. You can thank me later. Welcome back in, Locked On Texan listeners, to this Thursday episode of the Locked On Texan podcast. Thank you for sticking around. Really quick, as we talked about Trey Lance and that rumor surrounding the Houston Texans, it seems like every day, not only is it a new quarterback and new rumors surrounding the Houston Texans, but the same goes for CJ Stroud. Now we are hearing that he was all set to go to the Manning quarterback camp. and blew them off, didn't show up to that. We heard about the S2 test scores. And then he's going to forever be linked to his not free agent, but his agent because of the former great quarterback the Houston Texans had.
It's just too much at this point, man.
Every day for this team, there is something new, and now you are having. It just seems like it does seem like the media is purposely working against CJ Stroud right now.
I
so
know,
he can fall to a certain team.
I'm
a conspiracy theorist, but man, it's bad.
It gotta be, John. And I feel so bad for this young man because prior to like the last 2 to 3 weeks, everything that you heard about this young man was positive.
He's a great kid.
He's a great kid. He is, his work ethic is there. He is arguably the talent gap between him and Bryce Young is like, it's not really that much of a difference. Like he was projected, by a lot of people to be the number 2 quarterback, a top 5 prospect overall. And over the last couple of weeks, man, I truly do hate the way so many people have been talking down on this young man. Whoever is putting all of this negative stuff out, I hate to see it. And I hate to see about a lot of these prospects because at the end of the day, a lot of these guys are on the verge of accomplishing a lifelong dream that they have been working their behinds off, for their entire lives. And I just hate to see it for CJ, man. Whoever he goes to, just prove the doubters wrong, man.
Yeah. What if it's Houston putting these rumors out?
What
if it's
poker face. They're trying to talk somebody into trading up and so they could get him at another pick. I don't know. Poker face. That's my model of this draft. Poker face.
I wanted to bring up CJ and the things because I do want to, he is still an option as of right now. The draft hasn't happened. It's a week away officially, 7 days.
This is scary.
By the time you guys hear this. But it's important to look at the overall outlook of the roster right now, how this roster has been set up through free agency, looking at second-year players or players going into their second year, looking at players going into their third year, some of the vets on this roster, and if DeMeco Ryans can win with this roster. It was important for us to start off with Trey Lance because Trey Lance is a quarterback. And I wanted to mention C.J. Stroud again because there is a possibility that he could be the Houston Texans quarterback, even with all of the drama and rumors surrounding his name right now. Cody, I'm going to keep mine short, and I'm going to say this. How I look at this roster is they are a quarterback and a couple of playmakers away from competing in the AFC South. Plain and simple for me. I look not only how this roster was put together in free agency, like I love the Devin Singletary signing. He's a guy that I believe, he can give a break to Dameon Pierce, who got a lot of carries last season. And he got hit a lot last season, which is something that for Dameon Pierce, he may have not gotten hit that much with the amount of carries since high school, right? I love Dalton Schultz. He is your definitive number 1 tight end. And then now you got tight ends on the roster. And from what I'm hearing, Houston is still liking some – this is a very deep tight end class, by the way. Like if Houston can get Will Mallory late in the draft, maybe like 6 out of Miami, that's a steal. But you add, Dalton Schultz, and everybody else can kind of fill in and play and have specific things that they do well to stay on this roster. Not necessarily in love with the wide receiver group, which is why I put an emphasis on getting a couple of playmakers. But Jimmy Ward, Sheldon Rankins, Hassan Ridgeway, the upgrading at the linebacker position, right? And then we look at some of the vets that were here for another year. Some of the first-year guys from last year coming into this year. We all expect – I think my expectation for Christian Harris right now is through the roof now that DeMeco Ryans is his head coach. Same for Derek Stingley Jr. They got some guys, not Zion Johnson, the Keon Green. They got some guys going into another year, and now I think with a more competent head coach and coaching staff, this team is a quarterback and a couple of playmakers away from competing in the AFC South.
I agree. And I think when you take a look at the overall roster as of right now with the players that they have, I like that you use the term competing because, John, I went back over the last 2 seasons and the Houston Texans lost 27 games. Good Lord. Houston Texans lost 27 games over the last 2 seasons. However, 8 out of those 27 games were one-score losses. And I look at what the Houston Texans have on their roster as of right now, and I take a look at those 8 score losses that they have. I will go on a limb to say that the Texans will probably win half of those games now due to the veteran players that they were able to add to this roster during free agency. And the two games that just literally popped in my mind as of right now, when you go back and take a look how they lost to the Denver Broncos last year, then the following week to the Chicago Bears. If this roster was put together a little bit better in terms of having veterans, in terms of having not just veterans, but just players who can actually go out there and bring something to the field on both sides of the ball, especially on offense, they could come away victorious in both of those games. John, you mentioned a wide receiving core, and it brings me to my next point that regardless of what the Texans do in the draft next week, a lot of pressure is placed on this junior class. Nico Collins, Roy Lopez, and because we still don't know how this quarterback situation is going to work out, I'm gonna even throw Davis Mills in this equation as of right now because we're looking at how
Pressure
the
on
roster.
Brevin Jordan too, by the way.
Yo, definitely Brevin Jordan, and like I mentioned, we don't know how this quarterback situation is going to turn out at the start of the season, however they address it. But I'm going to add Davis Mills' name in this as of right now. Because remember, ladies and gentlemen, we're looking at the roster as of right now. And if the season was to start tomorrow, Davis Mills will still be your starter under center. However, with all that being said, John, when you take a look at the lack of playmakers that this team have, that junior class has to take a step forward. We thought that they was going to take a step forward last year, but a lot of these guys regress. Brevin Jordan was damn near out of the entire rotation, had a couple healthy scratches. Roy Lopez, I don't consider him a playmaker, but I would say he has to take a step forward in being a rotational guy that you can use on certain occasions. And when you take a look at this wide receiving core, as right now, Nico Collins has to take the step forward. And I know, when you take a look at this wide receiving core, I like the signing of Robert Woods. I like the signing of Noah Brown. I think both of those guys will add depth to that position group, and that's something that's something that this team lacked last year. However, they still don't have a number one wide receiver. Now, I know a lot of people are going to look at the name of John Mechie and say he has the potential to be your number one wide receiver. I agree. However, I'm not placing no expectations on his shoulders until possibly 2025 because it's going to take some time for him to get back to the John Mechie that we saw in Alabama. However, as of right now, Nico Collins has to take that step forward. One of my favorite moments last year, I'm in the locker room chopping it up with Collins, and I just asked him, how do you want to remember? Would you want your legacy to be with the Houston Texans if you are able to have a career here that has sustainable success? He said he wants his name to be mentioned alongside Andre Johnson, D-Hop, and he even mentioned Brandon Cooks. And if we being 100% honest, as of right now, Brandon Cooks is the third best wide receiver in franchise history. So I'm looking at that from a standpoint. If you want your name associated with those guys, especially the first two, D-Hop and Andre Johnson, you definitely need to start taking the helm as this team's number one wide receiver.
Cody, one thing that you mentioned about the last couple of seasons, how many of those one-score losses, how many of those games did Houston actually have the lead in at one point?
That was another issue.
This is a team that I think with the coaching staff, and I wanted to put an emphasis on competent coaching staff around this team. I truly believe, and I can get killed in the comments, I can get killed on Twitter, I can get killed wherever. This team is a quarterback and a couple of playmakers away. They got the coach. They have the coaching staff. They got the free agents that make sense. They upgraded at defensive line already. They upgraded with what you said with the depth at wide receiver position. Excuse me. They upgraded the running back spot, safety as well. So they made some good decisions. Now, this is what the draft is for. This is why I traded for Trey Lance doesn't make any sense for me. You can go out there and go get your own young quarterback, and he will be in a position to succeed. I'm not saying they can absolutely win the AFC South, but they can be competitive in this division with a quarterback and a couple of playmakers. Welcome back in, Locked On Texan listeners and viewers out there. Before we close out today's pod, Cody, every single day we are getting new rumors surrounding this team, right? Wake up and there's something new. So I'm going to ask Cody, but listeners, please join in the comments. What will be the new rumor for today?
So Texans is gonna be a quarterback. How about this one? Alert from Adam Schefter. The Texans have now switched their thoughts to a veteran quarterback and have flirted with the idea of signing Matt Ryan for a more win now approach, whatever the case might be. That's my theory.
Wow.
I think that's right. I think that'll be the next.
Wow.
Or Carson Wentz. It'll be Carson Wentz or Matt Ryan linked to the Texans today.
Let's do it. That's the rumor. That's the rumor for today. Before we close out, who's been the most impactful free agent for the Texans?
Devin Singletary. You know, last year, you know, in the second segment, I talked a lot about the one-score losses the Houston Texans have and how the way this roster is set up now, they could probably win half of those games. When you go back and take a look at those 8-score losses, a lot of it was due to the Houston Texans' inabilities to move the football. And when you go back and you take a look at how bad the Texans' offense got last year in terms of Dameon Pierce being the only offensive option, and not only that, once he got hurt and missed the last 4 games, the Texans, a lot of times, they really didn't run the football as much. They didn't run the football as well, I should say. When you take a look at Devin Singletary, the Houston Texans now have a damn good option at the number 2 running back position. Not only that, Singletary understands what it is to share the backfield responsibilities with another running back. We saw him do it last year in Buffalo with James Cook, another up-and-coming running back. And not only that, Devin Singletary is a guy who has rushed for no less than 600 yards in his career. And when you look at D'Amico, when you look at Bobby Slowick, and we are all expecting them to try to replicate San Francisco's offense, you know how much they rely on the run game. You know the Texans are going to continue to rely on the run game. With all of that being said, you need a number 2 running back. Devin Singletary, I think he's going to be the most impactful free agent by, let's say, midway through the 2023 campaign.
I got 2, man. Number 1, Sheldon Rankins. There's no way around it. Sheldon Rankins comes in, and I think that he immediately improves your run defense. And Sheldon Rankins also has, you know, experience with the New Orleans Saints, I believe, but getting to the playoffs, that's big. Also, Dalton Schultz on the offensive side of the ball. He is a guy that, again, a veteran tight end in this room, probably by the time the season starts, will be the best Texan tight end since Owen Daniels. And he is another guy that has playoff experience, just came off of a playoff run with the Dallas Cowboys where he was able to gain over 100 yards in 2 games with a touchdown. So I think that when you look at what Houston has been able to do in the past couple of seasons, we talk about DJ Reader and the loss of him all the time. Sheldon Rankins, I believe, steps in and helps this team make a significant jump at being better. Not great, but being better, more competitive and stopping the run. And with Dalton Schultz, he is a guy that if you have a young quarterback or maybe an older quarterback like a Matt Ryan, don't want to say that, knock on wood, but he's a guy that can be your security blanket and a damn good one at that. And so, again, I love the thought of Dalton Schultz with a Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud. Hell, even Anthony Richardson and Hendon Hooker, because I think that he is one of those players that experience in a high-octane offense with Dallas, playoff experience, and understands how to win as a tight end. Good blocker as well. So I think those are the two best more impactful free agent signings for the success for the 2023 season. Thank you guys for checking out today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. We're gonna have more rumors probably the next time y'all hear from us. But as always, make sure you follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans. And for more one-on-one conversations, more interactive conversations, follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12. Make sure that you give us a subscribe on YouTube as well under the name Locked On Texans.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody, COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.